Alright, this is a short video. I'm just going to try and show you some basic things that we're looking for when you make your tables and your figures. Alright? So, the first question we want to address is, why do we do tables and figures? We'll talk about this in class. Basically, this is going to be the bulk of your results section. There's not as much text in the results section. It's mostly going to be tables and figures. You've got to provide a lot of the numbers and summaries of a lot of the data that you collected for your experiment, because that's what you're going to use to evaluate the research, and that's what others are going to use to evaluate the research. And finally, they provide the evidence for supporting or rejecting your hypothesis. Remember that we talk about we provide a hypothesis, and then we try to collect evidence that supports that hypothesis or evidence to reject that hypothesis. So that evidence is going to be contained in your tables and figures. Okay, so when do we use a table and when do we use a figure? We'll talk about this a lot more in class 2, but basically the rule of thumb is if the actual numbers are important, you use a table. And if the trends are more important, that's when you use a figure. Okay? One thing that I see a lot of students do is that they put the same information in both a table and a figure. And to me, that's redundant. I would think that either you need to have a table or a figure, but you don't have the same information in both. Now, I realize that this is not, this is a little bit vague, it's not clear-cut, but as you read papers and as you write your own papers, as you work on this, you'll get a feel for what should go in a table and what should go in a figure. Alright, let's talk about tables. That's going to be this video. We'll do another video where we talk about the formatting and how to create figures. So this is table 3.1 from your Macmillan book, and this is an example of a good table, so this is the one we're going to work on. And I just want to highlight some of the things that we're looking for to get a well-built, properly formatted table. So the first thing is we're going to look at the caption, and one thing that you need to notice is that the caption always goes on top of the table. And in the figure, the caption goes on the bottom. That's something that you might not pick up, but that's one of the first things we look at. Tables, of course, are always numbered sequentially. That way you can refer to them elsewhere in the document. Often the name of the table, which is table 3.1, table 3.4, whatever, is in bold. The rest of the caption is not in bold. You'll see that the caption is in what I call sentence case. It's not necessarily a title. It's just a description of what's in the table, but you notice it's not really a sentence. They don't have a period here. That varies from document to document, whether or not it's an actual sentence or whether it's more like a title. Basically, though, someone needs to look at this caption and have a real good idea of what this table is about. In fact, that's a good rule for any table, is that if somebody were just handed this table without the rest of the document, they ought to be able to look at it and at least have a feel for what this table's trying to tell them. Next thing we're going to talk about are the headers, and the headers must have units. So here we have headers. We've got a couple of headers here. You've got one header, and this is the header that sort of tells us the units, and then you've got other headers right here. So this is what labels each column. Of course, each row also has a header. It's not really called a header if it's in the row. But the most important thing I want to point out here is that you have units. Everything that we do must have the proper units. If you don't have the units, then these numbers are meaningless. Okay? So that's a big thing that we're going to look for. Do you have the proper units? You don't want to put the units down here after every number. There's no reason to. The units go up here, or they go at the top of if each column is a different type of data, you're going to have different units there. And that is all I'm going to say about that. Third thing we want to look for is the data itself. And note that I put summary data, okay? Another thing that we see a lot of times with students is they tend to put raw data into a table, the data that they actually collected. Sometimes you want to do that, but often you do not. Most of the time, what you need here are summaries, like the mean concentration. In fact, this doesn't actually say if this is the mean or the median. It would probably say that in the text. Excuse me, in the caption, I would like to have something that says whether it's the mean or the median or here. But the point is that this is a summary of the data. It's not the raw data. All right, next thing we want to talk about are the borders. We want the table to be set off from the rest of the text. And different people do this differently, but this is how I want you to do it. This is what I think looks the best. You've got a top border and a bottom border, all right? And then you have a border that separates the headers from the rest of the table. And this will set the table off from the rest of the text, and we'll set the headers off, and it's nice and neat. Okay, the borders go the entire length of the table, but you notice that the border goes under the caption. The border does not go on top of the caption. Okay, last thing we want to talk about is just basic formatting that you're going to apply to your table. Again, these are the things I'm looking for. You'll notice that the left-hand column is what we call left justified. So you see that it's all lined here on the left side, but the other columns are centered. Notice that? You see how these numbers are all centered, 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 okay? And that's, again, very typical table formatting, and that's a detail that I'm going to be looking for. Other things, I guess, as far as formatting, we can point out, you see how the capitalization goes. You know, here just the first word is capitalized, but not the second. Same thing here. First word is capitalized, not the second. I don't know if that's necessarily a rule. The important thing with these sort of details, such as capitalization or how many decimal places or things like that, often, if there's not a clear rule, the most important rule is consistency, okay? And that is my biggest thing. So if you did Schwab Farm and you capitalized them both, you need to do that for every entry into the table, and you need to do it the same way in every table. That is one of the most important things that we look for, is consistency, because consistency indicates that you're paying attention to details, and that is something that's very important for scientific research, that you are paying attention to those small details. And if you don't have consistency, and if you have sloppiness, that suggests that perhaps your experimental design is sloppy, your data collection is sloppy, and it's just sloppy work overall. Okay, next I just briefly want to show you how to make tables in Word and how to apply some of this formatting. So let's go take a look at Word. Okay, I just want to show you quickly how to make a table in Word, and we're going to talk a little bit about how to do the formatting. We're not going to worry so much about the content. I'm just kind of making this table up. You see I've already got a caption here, Table 1, mean increase in weight in grams of 3 species of catfish fed 2 different diets. You see how that's a very specific caption. It's pretty clear what this table is going to include in it. I've put a few returns in under here to give myself some room. I'm going to select not right below the table, but a space right the next space down, and I'm going to go Insert Table, and you see I can draw this how big as big as I want. I'm going to want 3 by 5, I think, is the numbers that I want here. All right, and so I'm going to go ahead and insert some data first. So this is going to be increase in weight, and for diet 1, and for diet 2, and for channel catfish, blue catfish, and flathead catfish. Okay, and I'm just going to put some numbers in here just to get some numbers in. 100, 200, 300, 300, 200, I don't like that. 3,000, 2,000, 1,000. Diet 2 had a lot more calories. Okay, so we've got some raw data in here. Let's point out some things. First, you'll notice that I've got the units in the title. I could also put the units down here, increase in weight, grams, and then get rid of them up here. But the important thing is that we have the units for our data. You're going to notice that we've got the left-hand column is already left justified. We want these two columns to be centered. All right, so we can do that a couple of ways. We can go here to the Home tab, and if you look, there's a button here for centering. That works. Wonderful. Or, I'm going to Control Z and undo that. We can go to the Table Tools, the Design tab. Nope, it's going to be the Layout tab. And if you look here, you can see different ways to lay out your text. And you see here we've got several ways to lay them out in the center. This one puts it to the top of the cell in the center. This is the middle of the cell. This is the bottom of the cell. Shouldn't matter because you're not going to have more than one row in each cell for the most part. I would think, to me, this one, align bottom center, is going to be your best one. Okay, so now the data are aligned properly. You'll notice that this top header is not quite right. It's just over this column of data, but it applies to both columns of data. So let's go ahead and select this cell and the next cell. And we're going to look up here in Table Tools, Layout, and we're going to merge cells. And now it's centered, and it applies to both of those, which is what we want. Okay, so now we need to worry about the borders. You see that every cell is outlined by a border, and we don't like that. The easiest thing to do is to get rid of them all. So you'll see that this little thing up here allows you to select the whole table. If I click that, the whole table is selected. So now I can go to Table Tools, Layout. Now I'm going to go to Design, and you see I've got this Borders tab. I'm going to go ahead and drop that down and choose No Borders. If I click off, you see I've gotten rid of all the borders. It's easier to start with no borders. Now I'm going to select the top row, and if you watch my cursor, you see if I go over here, it keeps changing, and working with tables can be frustrating because you're trying to select things and you don't always get to select what you want. But if you go to the outside and you select and you watch the cursor, it changes to an arrow and I click. Now I have the top row selected. Okay? I could also click in this cell and drag across and select that top row. With the top row selected, I want to go down and look at borders again. Now I want to give it a top border. And if I click off, you see now I have that top border, which sets the table off. I select that row again, and I choose bottom border, and you see I have both a top and a bottom border. Perfect. All right. Now you might want to do it this way. I think what looks a little better, I'm going to go ahead and hold down Control and hit Z for my undo. What I think looks better, because we've got a second set of headers here, I'm going to select this row, and I'm going to go to Design, Borders, Bottom Border. And you see now the bottom border kind of sets off both sets of headers. I think this looks better. I also want to select the bottom row, put a bottom border on it, and Beautiful. That's a good looking table right there. Now, other little things that you want to play with, again, this can be frustrating with Word, but this table's kind of wide. I mean, look at all this wasted space. So I might want to use my cursor and watch my cursor change. Boom. See how that cursor changed? Now I can select that column. And now I got my cursor. I'm going to move it slowly. Watch my cursor. Watch my cursor. Boom. Did you see that? You see how that cursor changed to several different things, but now look at that cursor. That's going to allow me, if I click and hold, that's going to allow me to change the size of that column. Doesn't that look better? Another thing I can do is I can select a column and I can try and get it to auto fit to the data. So I can slowly move my cursor, boom. You see now I'm on a border right there. I'm going to double click and you see how it auto fit to the data. But it didn't really work, did it? Because it auto fit to this cell, but this cell has to go for that across both of those. So this isn't going to work. So no problem. Control Z to undo. And what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to grab this last column. Again, see how my cursor changed? And I'm going to drag in, drag in, drag in, drag in. And you'll notice that again, it didn't quite center this the way I wanted it to. So I'm going to Control Z and I am going to try drag this one. Drag in, drag in, drag in, drag in. And again, it didn't quite center this properly. Ugh! I'm going to Control Z. So I'm going to go to this cell and I'm going to unmerge this one. I don't like this one. So I'm going to go to Layout and I'm going to go to Split Cells and I'm going to split this into 2 columns in 1 row. Hit OK. And now I'm back to where I started. So now I'm going to select these 2 and instead of dragging, I'm going to come up here and go to width and I'm going to click the width down. Click it down, click it down, click it down. This way I know that both columns are exactly the same width. That's what I want. Okay? So now I'm going to click off. Now I'm going to get this cell, drag it across. Now I'm going to go ahead and merge again. And isn't that a pretty, pretty table? All right. Last thing is I can drag this, grab the table here, and I can drag it around. I can drag it left. I can drag it right. I can drag it to the middle, which is where I want it. All right, that's building a table in Word. Okay, well that's it. That's just trying to hit some of the highlights of some of the things we're looking for when you make your table. You got any questions, just let me know. See ya.